Alright, the throw. Now that we got placement down, the throw of the diffuser should be at least the room height. Alright, so the throw of the diffuser, we'll look at a spec sheet for a diffuser here in a little bit, but they always list a throw. And the throw is how far the air moves away from the diffuser until it reaches 50 feet per minute of air coming out. Sometimes the number's different, but it's usually 50 feet per minute. So we want the throw to be at least the room height. And we'll look at why that is shortly. I'll show you a picture and it'll make more sense. But you need good throw on the diffuser, and you need good coverage too. But the throw is one of the most important things, so that we make sure that we're moving the air far enough it's going to mix properly. Be mindful of diffusers placed so close to the wall that the drapes and the curtains and the drapes between the to travel inside the space. Let me repeat this. Be mindful of diffusers placed so close to the wall that they tend to travel inside the space of the curtains and drapes between the curtain and the wall, as this will prevent good air mixing in the air pattern. So you want to be careful about that. You really want to try to throw the air so that it's not going to travel in that direction, because all that friction of that air movement is going to slow the air down, and it's going to prevent good mixing. It could be something you can mitigate by, opening the curtains. Alright, you don't want them super close to the wall. You want a couple inches, 2 to 3 inches there generally, so that you're not traveling in between that area. I know some situations that's difficult, but it's just something to keep in mind if possible. Alright, so here's a good picture of air movement in the room. Okay, this is the kind of stuff you'll see in manual T. So we can see that the air throws out of the diffuser, and this is the throw. So if this is an 8-foot room, you want 8-foot tall room, you want 8 foot of throw. If it's a 10-foot tall room, you want 10 foot of throw. But you want the throw to at least get you this far. And then after that, the air is going to travel this way, and you're going to have room air that mixes in. Alright, this room air is going to mix in, and then it's going to circulate down and mix this way. So this is the air movement in the room. Okay, and here's your window. So the primary air, when we're talking about diffusers, the primary air is the air coming out of the diffuser, and the secondary air is the room air force to move from the diffuser's air movement. And then the air on the diffuser is going to tend to travel across the ceiling here, and that's because of what's called the Coanda Effect. And I don't know if I put that in here, but the Coanda Effect is the tendency of the air to cling to a surface as it travels. So this air is going to want to come up, cling to this window, and then cling to the ceiling and travel this way. And that air movement is going to suck room air into its movement and mix that whole room. So if you have good throw, you're going to mix the whole room. Okay, if you don't have good throw, okay, if your throw doesn't at least reach the ceiling, if it's only about 4 foot of throw, say, you've only got 4 foot of throw, the air is going to get here, and then it's going to reach terminal velocity, and you're probably only going to mix air about this far. Alright, so you're going to end up real short, and this whole room's not going to get covered. And the bigger the room, the more throw you want. So it's something you got to kind of picture in your head a little bit. Based on the throw, if I picked a diffuser with 12 foot of throw because it's a big room, then this air is going to move this far before it slows down. So it's still going to want to travel all the way across and get here. But if this was a really large room and we only had 8 foot of throw, then you were going to get this far, but the room might go that far over, you know what I mean? If the room continues over here, you might end up short on the air throw. And there's no hard and fast rule. I can't say, if it's 20 foot wide, you want 12 foot of throw. But you just kind of say, okay, this is a bigger room. I need more CFM. Do I want to pick 2 80 CFM diffusers, or do I want one single 100 CFM? Or do I even want one single 120 CFM because it's such a big room? Again, generally, I try not to go 100 CFM per register, right? But if it's a very large room, I might, because it's a good option for that situation. And as long as you try to think about it and pick diffusers well, you will do 10 times better than not trying at all. You don't need to get perfect, but you need to think about these things as you're placing diffusers in a room. All right? High sidewall outlets. So high sidewall outlets are placed on inside walls. Ducts should never be placed within the wall cavity of an outside wall, but on inside walls you can do high sidewall outlets, and these will be placed so the air blows toward the outside wall in most cases where possible. Alright, and this is an ideal location for cooling dependent climates. Alright, so if you're in an area that needs a lot of cooling, if you're in Florida or Texas or something like that, then high sidewalls are actually great. It's a great way to do it. And the reason that is, which we haven't discussed yet, is if you're in heating, right? If you're in heating, then the cold air is outside and the heat's trying to escape, right? So this heat's trying to escape. So the air is going to be moving this way. So we want the hottest part to be the outside wall, right? Because we want that air to want to kind of not try to escape so much. If the warmest part is right here, then all the air is going to continue moving in the room, and we're not going to feel that draft of air trying to escape, right? So it's going to get this far, but we're not going to get a draft because all the air is moving. Whereas if we don't have it here, all right, if we have it, what the heck? If we have it, here, right? If this is our warm air, then all this heat, this is going to be your hottest area right here near the diffuser, and you're going to feel all this air moving. But when it's in cooling, okay, when it's in cooling, the heat's trying to get in, right? So we got all this heat trying to get in right here. So we keep the colder portion inside the room because drafts aren't as much of a big deal in cooling, right? Drafts generally feel good in cooling, and we want this cold air to not be up against the outside wall. It's always hard to explain this. If the warmest part's the outside wall and heating, right, then the air, this heat is only escaping and we don't feel this air movement in the room. If it's in cooling, this heat is trying to get in, so we're trying to keep the most cold air as we can center of the room, because if we keep the wall cold, the heat, and remember, the bigger the temperature difference, the faster the heat moves, so the heat's just going to move even faster if we keep this wall cold. Does that make sense? It's okay if it's moving faster here because it's on an outside wall, but we want to minimize the amount of heat movement here because we're trying to keep it cool. That's the best way I can explain it. It's always difficult to find just the right way. One of these days I'll find just the right way to explain it. But just remember, ideally in heating, we heat the outside wall. All right. Ideally in cooling, we keep the coldest air center of the room. All right. The throw should be enough to reach the opposite wall in the direction of the airflow of the register. And this one's not as critical because, again, we're not necessarily trying to get all the way to the outside wall. We're just trying to get good air movement in the room within the occupied zone. And I know we haven't talked about it yet. There's a slide here in a little bit on the occupied zone. But the occupied zone starts 2 feet away from the wall. So, you know, if your throw only gets within 2 feet of the outside wall on a high sidewall, that's not too big of a deal, right? Stop the air here, it'll begin to drop a little bit sooner, but we're still going to get air movement or air mixing within the middle of the room. But I still try generally, you know, if this is a where's it at? If this is a 12-foot room, you know what I mean? If this measurement right here is 12 feet, then that's how much throw I want. In general, that's how I'm going to pick that. So, That's the rule of thumb. Either up to the ceiling or from inside wall to outside wall. But again, in our area, you shouldn't be doing high sidewalls anyway. You see them in apartment buildings and stuff sometimes, but it's very poor location for our climate. They tend to not work nearly as well as along windows and outside walls. And then the last one, ceiling diffusers. Ceiling diffusers are generally centrally located in a room or placed in a corner opposite of the ceiling return. When multiple diffusers are necessary, they will be located in a symmetric pattern so that the throw covers the whole of the room. Ceiling diffusers are better for cooling but adequate for both heating and cooling situations. And ceiling diffusers are actually very well suited for basements. Basements with very little exposure to the outside, you get pretty good air mixing with the diffuser, and they're generally easier to place, and they work well in basement rooms. So basements, ceiling diffusers work well. Otherwise, most locations and basements will do okay. Any of these three options are pretty good for a low exposure basement, but ceiling diffusers are generally your easiest option. And the nice thing about ceiling diffusers is that you're throwing two ways generally, right? So since you're throwing 2 or 4 ways, your throw, if this is a 16-foot room, we're down to 8 feet of throw here. Or if it's a 12-foot room, we're only 6 feet of throw. So a lot of times our throw can be a bit less with a ceiling diffuser. But we're trying to make the air travel along the ceiling and then down the walls. Alright, throw should be enough to reach all 4 walls of a room, almost as most ceiling diffusers blow in all directions. In all cases, the air will tend to travel along the walls and ceiling due to the Coanda Effect. And I've already explained it, so I won't repeat it. But there is your slide on Coanda Effect. Tendency of the moving air to attach itself to a surface and flow along it. In all cases, the primary air from the diffuser, that is the air coming directly out of the diffuser, should be kept outside of the occupied zone. The occupied zone of the walls start 2 from all sides and extends 6 foot high. So this is your occupied zone, right? This area right here, your occupied zone. 2 feet in from the walls, 6 feet high. Alright? So your air movement, your supply air register should be outside the occupied zone, right? If it's a ceiling diffuser, it should be outside the occupied zone and blow, along the top of the ceiling. If it's high inside sidewall, it's going to blow over top of the occupied zone, right? So in all cases, the actual air exiting the diffuser should be outside the occupied zone. This is because direct airflow onto a person is generally considered uncomfortable unless the person is already hot. Alright, there may be instances where this is desirable. Gyms are a good example, but is generally not recommended in any residential or most commercial applications. We talked about throw. Alright, we'll talk about spread and face velocity. So the velocity of the supply air as it leaves the outlet, that's the face velocity. So whatever the velocity of the air is calculated at that. So how fast the air is moving at the face of this diffuser. Generally 300 to 700 feet per minute is going to be your range. That's the face velocity. The terminal velocity is the velocity of the supply air at the end of its effective throw. And like I said, that's usually 50 feet per minute. Feet per minute, right? That's usually going to be your terminal velocity. That's what most diffusers are calculated at as far as terminal velocity. Okay? The throw is the effective distance that the air leaving travels. We talked about that. And then the spread, the width of the airstream leaving the supply outlets is determined by the characteristics of the supply outlet. So this supply outlet, this register has a straight throw, so it just throws in one direction. There's very little spread. With this register, you can see it's got more of a spread. Generally, I try and pick one that's going to cover the windows. So a regular register with a low amount of spread is good for a single window. But if I've got a larger window, I might want more spread So you can see this one spreads out even more. And usually the higher the spread, the smaller the throw. So you'll really only want high spread diffusers or registers where they're necessary. Ceiling diffusers will have a really high spread, but registers underneath windows are going to have a little bit less of a spread. But if you've got multiple windows in line, you might want a larger spread to kind of cover that whole window area and create a good draft barrier. But like I said, a lot of times it's going to mitigate your throw. So finding a lot of spread and a lot of throw is the hard part. You got to balance those two to get good room air mixing characteristics. Some other general notes on diffuser selection are ideal face velocity for supply outlets is generally 400 to 700 feet per minute. Really 500 feet per minute is what you're trying to aim for most of the time. Especially choose diffusers in this range if noise criteria is not available. For 8-foot high ceilings, supply outlets should generally provide no more than 100 CFM. If over 100 CFM is required, provide multiple diffusers unless it's a really big room, right? Taller room heights require greater CFM to meet the necessary throw height. Noise criteria should be kept around 30 for most residential applications. Some more information regarding noise is provided below. So there's some notes here that you guys can read on guidelines to minimize noise in the air distribution system. I would highly recommend you take a look at it. And then here's a table for guidelines, and the noise criteria is always going to be listed for a diffuser based on the face velocity, but generally you're going to want something in the 30 range, which most residential registers at about 500 feet per minute are pretty close. So that's just these are some noise criteria. Notice noisier rooms, gymnasiums and stuff like that, we can have a higher noise criteria. More quiet areas like music studios and stuff like that will have a lower noise criteria, especially if it's a recording space for music. You'll have a low noise criteria, and if it's a busy room, open office plan or something, you can have a higher noise criteria. Alright, so an example of diffuser selection. Alright, so if I know that a room needs 85 CFM per my load calculation and has an 8-foot ceiling, which of these diffusers would provide better required air? Alright, so we have this one, a 411 diffuser, and these are all Hart and Cooley. Alright, these are Hart and Cooley diffusers. That's what I usually look at on residential. They have good product data, they have good manuals, so I mean that's a good option to find good data. So if we're looking at this one, you're gonna have 7.5 feet of throw. Alright, we got 85 CFM, 7.5 feet of throw, and 7.5 foot of spread and 4.5 feet of throw, right? On this one, this is a 4x10, 411. On a 421 floor diffuser, we have 85 CFM, 6.5 foot of spread, and 8 foot of throw. So we have a little less spread, but we have almost the double of the throw height. So in this situation, this would be the better diffuser for that particular application. So that's what you want to look at. You want to look at those, and these ones actually don't list noise criteria, but like I said, most of these are going to be in your 30 range anyway until you get up to these higher velocities. But that's what you're looking at. Do I have the throw? Do I have the spread? Now if I had a double window, I might want to just go ahead and sacrifice that throw for more spread. That might be a good option, especially if it's not a very large room. That may be a better option. It's something to think about, but in general, that would be the diffuser I would select. Alright, so just right here I just made the note of everything I talked about, and if you look at these, they're very similar. They look the same, right? This diffuser looks like this diffuser, but they are actually very different in their air pattern. So selecting that diffuser is more important than you think sometimes. And that's basically it. That's what manual T boils down to. you guys have this so you can take a look at it, read over it again. But all the points that I specifically noted are what I want you to remember as far as manual T, and that's basically all of the information in manual T, is just these key points on diffuser selection and placement. Let me know if you got any questions, and that's it.